I'm Lieutenant Colonel Ella Carson, 35 years old, a U.S. Air Force pilot who led Talon flight through Kabul and brought most of my people home. For years, I kept my family's image spotless, showed up, stayed quiet, carried their pride and their silence. But when they told me my therapy sessions were embarrassing the family and uninvited me from the reunion, I made a different choice. Ever been written off by the very people you fought to make proud? If so, tell me your story in the comments. You're not alone. Before I get into what happened, let me know where you're tuning in from. And if you've ever had to stand your ground after being dismissed or shamed for taking care of yourself, hit like and subscribe for more real stories about drawing boundaries and reclaiming your worth. What happened next surprised even me. I sat outside the mental health clinic at 1300 hours, watching the secondhand sweep around the face of my watch. The waiting room smelled like industrial cleaner and stale coffee. My phone buzzed against my thigh, another text from my mother. Still going to that thing? You know how that looks. I didn't respond. I'd learned that silence was easier than explaining why Major Ella Carson, USAF, pilot, academy graduate, needed 50 minutes every Thursday to talk about Kabul with Captain Ana Villanueva. The family group chat had been active all week. My brother Aaron posted photos from his last port call. My mother shared recipes she'd never actually made. My father's profile picture was still him in dress blues from 15 years ago, silver eagles on his shoulders, jaw set like he was facing down an enemy he couldn't see. Nobody addressed me directly. When they planned the reunion, 3 generations of Carsons serving strong, my name simply didn't appear in the logistics chain. I offered to coordinate transportation for my father anyway. Sent him the message at 0630 on a Tuesday. He read it. Never replied. Around base, people talked. Not to my face, but in that particular way where conversations pause when you enter the room and resume half a beat too quickly when you leave. She's seeing a shrink because she couldn't handle Kabul. That was the prevailing theory. Like therapy was a weakness instead of a standing appointment, like trauma was something you could just iron out of your uniform if you pressed hard enough. Captain Villanueva opened her office door. She was younger than me by 2 years, but had a steadiness that made rank feel irrelevant in her space. Major Carson. She gestured me inside. The office was standard issue, desk, 2 chairs, a window that overlooked the parking lot. No couch. No tissues prominently displayed. Just 2 officers having a professional conversation about operational trauma and command stress. How was your week? She asked, settling into her chair with a notepad she rarely referenced. Fine. Completed readiness reports. Ran morning briefings. The usual. And the reunion? I looked past her, out the window where heat shimmered off the asphalt. I'm not going. She waited. That was her particular skill, waiting without pressure, creating space for words to find their way out. They uninvited me, I said. Not officially. Just stopped including me in the planning. My mother called yesterday and made it explicit. Said my therapy appointments are embarrassing the family. What did you say? Copy that. Then I hung up. Villanueva wrote something down, though I suspected it was just to give me a moment to collect myself. How does that feel? Like a briefing that's already concluded. I straightened in my chair. They've made their assessment. I'm the weak link. The one who couldn't handle it, who needs help, who's making them look bad by association. Do you believe that assessment is accurate? No. The word came out sharper than I intended. I led Talon flight through Kabul. We pulled civilians out under fire. We did our job. I lost 2 airmen, Sergeant Dixon and Airman Reyes. They didn't make it home. I did. And when I came back, nobody wanted to hear about it. My father framed my medal, but never asked about the names on the citation. Villanueva leaned forward slightly. When did silence become your family's currency? I thought about that, really thought about it. Before I was born. We sat with that for a moment. Then she pulled up something on her computer and turned the screen toward me. Have you seen this? Memorial ceremony at Peterson. They're showing footage from Kabul. Your flight's footage. I read the notice twice. General Thomas Shirley, 08, keynote speaker. Aerial evacuation footage. My name listed under the screening schedule. I didn't know they were making this public. Will you attend? I don't know. My family will be at their reunion that weekend. Matching shirts, probably. 3 generations of service, -1. You could go to both. I shook my head. They made their choice. I'm making mine. The session ended at 13:50 hours. I walked back to my office through the late spring heat, past airmen heading to the commissary, past the static displays of aircraft that had flown missions before I was born. My phone buzzed again, this time the family chat. Someone had posted a photo of custom t-shirts. Carson served strong in bold letters across the chest. 47 members reacted with hearts and thumbs up. I scrolled past without reacting. That evening, I sat in my apartment, standard base housing, beige walls, furniture that came with the assignment. I opened my laptop and pulled up the memorial program again. Major Ella Carson. Kabul. August 2021. The cursor blinked in the RSVP field. I thought about my father, about the way he'd said we all saw things after I came back. You don't see me talking to anyone about it. Like his silence made him stronger. Like my words made me weak. I clicked yes on the RSVP. Not for my parents. Not for the medal or the recognition or the chance to prove something to people who'd already made up their minds about me. For Dixon. For Reyes. For every airman who'd climbed into that aircraft trusting I'd get them home. My phone lit up again, Aaron this time, separate from the group chat. You know, Mom? Just lay low. I read it 3 times, then deleted it without responding. Laying low was what they wanted. Staying quiet. Pretending therapy was something shameful instead of necessary. Pretending Kabul hadn't happened, or if it had, that I should have handled it better, cleaner, without needing to process it afterward in a clinic that smelled like industrial cleaner. I finished my readiness report that night. Filed it at 2200 hours. The apartment was quiet in that particular way that feels like held breath, not peaceful, just empty. I thought about the reunion, about my family gathered together without me, about how they'd explain my absence if anyone asked. Probably wouldn't mention it at all. Just smile for photos and serve strong, whatever that meant. The memorial was in 6 days. I pulled my service dress blues from the closet, checked for loose threads, made sure my silver oak leaves were properly positioned. Everything regulation. Everything correct. I'd learned a long time ago that perfection was armor. If they couldn't find fault with your uniform, your posture, your execution of duty, they had to look somewhere else for weakness. And I'd given them therapy. Given them vulnerability. Given them something they could point to and say, see, she's not like us. But I was like them. I'd just stopped pretending that serving strong meant suffering in silence. I'd stopped believing that asking for help was the same as admitting defeat. And if that made me an embarrassment, if that made me the Carson they didn't want at their reunion, then maybe I'd outgrown them before they'd decided to cut me loose. I set my alarm for 05:30 and lay down in the dark, thinking about aircraft and fire and voices over comms saying we're taking hits, and my own voice responding steady, calm, get them aboard, we're not leaving anyone behind. 6 days until the memorial. 6 days until General Shirley said my name in front of an audience who understood that courage looked different depending on the day, the mission, the cost. 6 days until my family realized they'd miscalculated. The weekend of the reunion arrived on a Saturday morning that felt like every other Saturday, alarm at 05:30, run at 0600, breakfast alone at the kitchen counter scrolling through news I'd already read. My phone stayed quiet. The family group chat had gone silent the night before, everyone traveling, converging on my uncle's property in Virginia where they'd gather under a white tent and talk about service like it was a single, unified experience we'd all shared equally. I wasn't invited. That fact sat in my chest like something solid and immovable, not painful exactly, just present. A thing I'd have to carry and eventually learn to set down. The memorial invitation sat on my counter, printed, official, embossed with the Air Force seal. 1700 hours, Peterson AFB, Hangar 7. Dress blues required. I read it again, though I'd memorized every word days ago. My name appeared twice. Once in the program. Once in the footage credits. Major Ella Carson, Talon Flight Lead, Kabul Evacuation Operations, August 2021. My mother had called Wednesday night. I'd let it go to voicemail, then played the message on speaker while I organized my desk. Ella, your father and I talked. We think it's best if you don't come to the reunion. Your therapy sessions are embarrassing us. People talk. You understand. A pause. We're not angry. We just think you need to work through whatever this is before you're around the family again. I'd saved the message. Not because I wanted to hear it again, but because I wanted proof. Evidence that this conversation had actually happened, that I hadn't imagined the careful distance my family had been building between us for months. Thursday, Aaron sent a text. You know, Mom. Just lay low. I'd stared at those 4 words, just lay low, like they were a code I should be able to crack. Lay low meant disappear. Meant stop being visible. Meant stop going to therapy, stop talking about Kabul, stop doing anything that suggested Major Ella Carson was anything other than perfectly fine, perfectly strong, perfectly capable of carrying operational trauma without ever setting it down. I deleted the text without responding. Friday evening, the family posts started appearing. My aunt uploaded a photo of the custom t-shirts spread across her dining room table. Carson served strong in military stencil font. 43 shirts. 43 family members. I wasn't on the count. My cousin commented, can't wait to see everyone. My mother replied with 3 heart emojis. I closed the app and didn't open it again. Saturday morning, I put on my service dress blues. The jacket fit the way it always had, shoulders square, brass polished, ribbons aligned perfectly above my left pocket. The silver oak leaves on my shoulders caught the light. 04. Major. Field Grade Officer. I'd earned this rank the same way I'd earned everything else, through work, through competence, through showing up every day and doing the job even when the job tried to kill you. I looked at myself in the mirror. My mother's voice echoed in my head, you know how that looks. She'd meant therapy, meant weakness, meant anything that suggested the Carson family produced officers who needed help instead of officers who simply endured. But standing there in my blues, I didn't look weak. I looked like exactly what I was, a major in the United States Air Force who'd led a flight through combat, who'd brought her people home -2, who'd earned her medals and her trauma in equal measure. The memorial started at 1700 hours. I left my apartment at 15:30, giving myself time to sit in the parking lot if I needed to, time to breathe, time to remember why I was going. Not for recognition. Not to prove anything to my family, who were 200 miles away taking photos in matching shirts. I was going for Dixon and Reyes. For the airmen who'd trusted me with their lives and lost them anyway. Peterson AFB felt familiar in the way all bases felt familiar, same layout, same buildings, same sense of purpose moving through the spaces between hangars and offices. I parked near Hangar 7 and watched people arrive. Officers in blues. Enlisted in blues. Civilians in suits. Everyone moving with that particular military bearing that never quite left, even in grief. Inside, the hangar had been transformed. Rows of chairs faced a stage where a screen hung ready for footage. Flags lined the walls, American, Air Force, POW MIA. The smell of metal and old aircraft oil mixed with something floral from the memorial wreaths positioned near the stage. I found a seat 3 rows from the front, right side aisle. People filed in around me. Nobody spoke much. This wasn't that kind of gathering. At 16:55, General Thomas Shirley entered through a side door. 08. 2 stars. Late 50s, maybe, with gray at his temples and the kind of posture that suggested he'd been standing at attention since birth. He moved to the podium, adjusted the microphone, and waited for 1700 hours exactly. The ceremony began on time. An invocation. The national anthem. Remarks from a colonel whose name I didn't catch. Then General Shirley stepped forward, and the room went completely still. We gather today, he said, to remember those we lost, and to honor those who brought them home. His voice carried authority without volume. Every word precise, measured, designed for maximum impact with minimum excess. Courage doesn't always look like charging forward. Sometimes it looks like walking into a clinic. Sometimes it looks like asking for help. Sometimes it looks like doing the job even when the job breaks something inside you. I felt my spine straighten. Today we'll see footage from the Kabul evacuation. Talon flight. Major Ella Carson commanding. My name. He'd said my name. Major Carson led her flight through hostile fire to extract personnel under combat conditions. Her steady command saved lives. Her decisions, made under impossible pressure, exemplified the finest traditions of military service. The screen behind him illuminated my cockpit footage. The GoPro I'd worn out of habit, never thinking anyone but training reviewers would see it. The scene opened on darkness, the cockpit lit only by instruments, the ground below barely visible. My voice came through the speakers, calm and level. Talon flight, we're taking fire from the northeast. Continue approach. Get them aboard. Tracer rounds streaked across the screen. Someone shouted coordinates. My hands steady on the controls, making corrections, holding position. We're not leaving anyone behind. The footage showed loading operations. Airmen running. Civilians climbing aboard. And then the moment, the explosion that took Dixon and Reyes. The screen went white, then dark, then stabilized as we lifted off, aircraft shaking, alarm screaming, my voice still steady. We're up. We're up. Count off. The roll call. Every voice except two. The footage ended. The hangar was completely silent. Then General Shirley began to applaud. Slowly. Deliberately. The entire audience rose. The sound built, not wild, not excessive, but steady and respectful. A standing ovation for a mission that had cost everything and saved most. I stood. Saluted. Saturday. My phone buzzed against my hip. Once. Twice. Again. Again. I didn't check it. General Shirley continued speaking, but I barely heard him. The footage had said everything necessary. Dixon. Reyes. The mission. The cost. The decision to keep going anyway. When the ceremony ended at 1800 hours, I walked outside into the late afternoon sun. My phone showed 34 missed calls. Mother. Father. Aaron. My aunt. My uncle. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in months. I turned the phone face down and looked up at the sky, clear and blue and empty of threat. Somewhere in Virginia, my family had watched their reunion disintegrate into crisis management. Somewhere, my mother was trying to explain why she'd told people I couldn't attend. Somewhere, my father was realizing that General Thomas Shirley, 08, had publicly honored the daughter he'd privately abandoned. I didn't call them back. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I'd done what I came to do. Said goodbye to Dixon and Reyes the way they deserved, publicly, officially, with their names spoken in a room full of people who understood sacrifice. Everything else could wait. Monday morning arrived with the particular clarity that follows irreversible decisions. I ran at 0600, showered, dressed, and arrived at my office by 0730. The missed calls had stopped accumulating around 2300 hours the previous night. 34 total. I hadn't listened to a single voicemail. My commanding officer stopped by at 0815. Colonel Marcus Webb, 06, 28 years in service, the kind of leader who noticed things without making a production of noticing. He knocked once on my open door and entered without waiting for permission. Major Carson. Good weekend. Yes, sir. Attended the memorial at Peterson. I heard. He smiled slightly. General Shirley spoke highly of your service. Your name's making rounds in positive ways. Appreciated, sir. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. Keep up the good work. He left without mentioning my family, though I suspected he knew. Everyone knew. That was how bases worked. Information traveled faster than aircraft. My phone buzzed at 0900. My mother. I declined the call and returned to the logistics report I'd been reviewing. At 0930, she called again. Again at 1000 hours. At 10:30, I turned my phone completely off and left it in my desk drawer. Lunch was in the dining facility, alone, exactly how I preferred it. I ate quickly and efficiently, reviewing briefing notes for the afternoon meeting. Around me, airmen talked and laughed, the normal sounds of a base at midday. Nobody approached me. Nobody asked about the memorial or my family or why General Shirley had said my name in front of 300 people. At 1300 hours, I had therapy. I arrived 5 minutes early and waited in the same chair I'd occupied every Thursday for 8 months. Captain Villanueva opened her door at exactly 1300. Major Carson. I followed her inside. Sat in my usual chair. She settled across from me with her notepad and waited. I went to the memorial, I said. How was it? General Shirley showed the Kabul footage. Said my name. Called out my command decisions as exemplary. I kept my voice level professional. The entire audience gave a standing ovation. How did that feel? I thought about the question. Really examined it. Like being seen. Actually seen. Not as the Carson who needs therapy. Not as the daughter who embarrasses the family. Just as Major Ella Carson who did her job under impossible circumstances. Did your family attend? No. They were at their reunion. 200 miles away, taking photos in matching shirts. I paused. They called 34 times after the ceremony. I haven't answered. Villanueva wrote something down. Do you plan to answer? Eventually. Maybe. I don't know. I looked at her directly. What's the protocol here? For families who cut you out then panic when they realize they miscalculated. There's no protocol. Just choices. You can engage or not engage. You can set boundaries. You can decide what kind of relationship, if any, serves your well-being. They'll want to apologize. Or explain. Or justify. Probably. And I'm supposed to just accept that? Welcome them back after they uninvited me for getting help. You're not supposed to do anything. This is your choice, Major. Your family doesn't get to dictate the terms anymore. We sat in silence. Outside, someone was running drill practice. The cadence count echoed through the window, sharp, rhythmic, familiar. My father called me weak once, I said. Not directly. Just implied it. Said he'd seen things too, but he never needed to talk to anyone about it. Like silence was strength. Like carrying everything alone was some kind of virtue. Do you believe that? No. I used to. I thought asking for help meant I'd failed somehow. That real officers just pushed through. But Dixon and Reyes are dead, and I'm here, and if I didn't process that, if I didn't talk about it and work through it and figure out how to carry it properly, then their deaths would have broken something in me that couldn't be fixed. Villanueva nodded. You made the harder choice. You chose to feel it instead of bury it. And my family sees that as weakness. Your family is wrong. The certainty in her voice landed like an order. Clear. Inarguable. Final. At 1350, the session ended. I walked back to my office through the midday heat, past airmen who saluted, past buildings that all looked identical in their purpose and function. My desk drawer still held my phone, powered off, holding messages I hadn't heard. I left it there. That evening, I went home to my beige apartment and made dinner. Chicken, rice, vegetables, all portioned correctly, all consumed without tasting much. I sat on my couch and opened my laptop. The family group chat had exploded. 47 unread messages. I scrolled through without really reading. Did you see the ceremony? Ella was there. Why didn't she tell us? Call her. She's not answering. What do we say? My mother's message, posted at 1900 hours. We need to talk about this as a family. Ella, please call. My father's, 20 minutes later. You should have told us about the memorial. Aaron's, come on, Ella. Pick up. I closed the laptop without responding. Tuesday brought more of the same. Work in the morning. Meetings in the afternoon. My phone stayed off. People on base treated me normally, which was exactly what I needed. No special attention, no questions, just the regular operational rhythm of military life. Wednesday, Colonel Webb called me to his office. Major Carson. Sit. I sat. Your family's been trying to reach you through official channels. Your father called the squadron yesterday. Your mother called this morning. Yes, sir. I told them I'd pass along their message. Consider it passed. What you do with it is your business, not mine. Understood, sir. He leaned back in his chair. For what it's worth, Carson, you're one of my best officers. What happened at Kabul, how you handled it, the way you've continued to serve, that's the kind of leadership we need. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Thank you, sir. Dismissed. I returned to my office and finally turned on my phone. 62 missed calls. 40 text messages. 3 voicemails from my father, 2 from my mother, 1 from Aaron. I listened to the first voicemail on speaker, volume low. My father's voice, Ella. We saw the ceremony online. Someone posted footage. We didn't know. We didn't know General Shirley was going to say those things about you. We need to talk. This is your father. Call me back. The second voicemail, my mother, Ella, please. We're proud of you. We always have been. There's been a misunderstanding. Call us. Aaron's, sis. Come on. They're freaking out. Just call them back. Please. I deleted all 3 without saving them. Then I typed a single message in the family group chat. I received your messages. I need space right now. I'll reach out when I'm ready. I sent it before I could reconsider. The responses came immediately. Heart emojis. Take your time. We love you. We're here when you're ready. I muted the chat and put my phone away. Thursday, 1300 hours. Therapy. Captain Villanueva waited for me to settle before speaking. How are you managing the family contact? I sent one message. Told them I need space. Haven't engaged beyond that. How does that feel? Like I'm holding a boundary for the first time in my life. I paused. It feels good. And terrifying. And necessary. Tell me about terrifying. What if I lose them completely? What if this is the thing that makes the distance permanent? Is the alternative better? Going back to a dynamic where your mental health is an embarrassment? No. Then you're not losing them. You're establishing what kind of relationship you're willing to have. We talked for the full 50 minutes. When I left, I felt steadier. Clearer. Like I'd been flying through clouds and finally broken into open sky. Friday afternoon, I received official orders. Transfer to Joint Base Andrews. Operations Coordination. New assignment starting in 60 days. I read the orders twice, then filed them carefully in my personnel folder. A new base. New mission. New start. That weekend, I packed nothing. Just ran, ate, slept, and let the silence settle into something that felt less like loneliness and more like peace. My phone stayed on, but I didn't check the family chat. Didn't listen to new voicemails. Just existed in the space I'd created, learning how to be Major Ella Carson without the weight of family expectations pressing down on every decision. Sunday evening, I sat on my couch and looked at the memorial program I'd brought home from Peterson. It sat on my coffee table, creased from being folded in my jacket pocket. I picked it up and read my name again. Major Ella Carson. Talon Flight Lead. Kabul Evacuation Operations. That was who I was. Not the embarrassment. Not the weak one. Not the Carson they'd rather hide. Just an officer who'd done her job and asked for help processing the cost. And if my family couldn't accept that, then maybe they'd never really known me at all. The transfer orders to Joint Base Andrews became official in June. 60 days to out-process, pack, and prepare for the new assignment. I worked through the checklist methodically, medical records updated, security clearance reviewed, housing arrangements confirmed. The process was familiar, comforting even. Military life was defined by transitions, and I'd always been good at them. My family's attempts at contact decreased over those 60 days. The frantic calls stopped. The desperate texts slowed. Eventually, they settled into something more measured, a message every few days, nothing demanding, just small observations. My mother sent a photo of her garden. My father forwarded an article about Air Force budget appropriations. Aaron texted updates from his deployment, brief and factual. I responded occasionally. Short replies. No emotion. Just acknowledgement that I'd received their messages and was still alive. At therapy, Captain Villanueva and I shifted focus. Less about Kabul now, more about family systems and boundary setting. How to maintain relationships with people who'd hurt you. Whether maintaining those relationships was even necessary. You don't owe them forgiveness, she said during one session. You don't owe them reconciliation. You only owe yourself honesty about what you need. What if I don't know what I need? Then you wait until you do. There's no timeline on this, Major. Work became my anchor. I ran briefings, coordinated logistics, mentored younger officers. One afternoon, A first lieutenant stopped by my office fresh from the academy, 23 years old, nervous energy barely contained. "Ma'am, do you have a minute?" "Come in, Lieutenant." She sat on the edge of the chair across from my desk. "I wanted to ask about something. It's kind of personal." I waited. "I've been thinking about talking to someone. Mental health services. But I'm worried about how it'll look on my record. If it'll affect my career." I studied her for a moment. Saw myself at 23, convinced that asking for help meant admitting defeat. "You're asking the right question to the wrong officer." She looked confused. "I've been in therapy for 9 months. It's on my record. It hasn't hurt my career. Actually helped it. I'm better at my job now than I was before Kabul." I leaned forward slightly. "You know what hurts careers? Not addressing trauma. Making mistakes because you're not processing stress. Burning out before you hit 03. You really think it's okay?" "I think it's necessary. This job costs something, Lieutenant. You pay that cost through therapy or you pay it through worse things. Choose therapy." She nodded slowly, then stood. "Thank you, ma'am." After she left, I sat at my desk and thought about the younger officer I'd been. The one who believed silence was strength. The one who would have been mortified to admit she needed help. That officer was gone. In her place was someone who understood that real strength looked like walking into a clinic every Thursday and doing the actual work of healing. My last day at the current base came on a Friday in August. People stopped by to say goodbye, colleagues, subordinates, a few superior officers. Standard departure protocol. Nothing sentimental. Colonel Webb called me to his office at 1500 hours. "Carson, you've been an asset to this squadron. Andrews is lucky to get you." "Thank you, sir. One more thing." He pulled a folder from his desk. "You've been selected for an assignment in addition to your coordination duties. They want you working with the Mental Health Services branch, helping develop programs for officers returning from deployment. Your operational experience, combined with your willingness to be public about therapy, they think you're the right person for it." I took the folder and opened it. The assignment details were clear. Half my time in operations, half in developing support structures for personnel dealing with trauma. "This is because of the memorial," I said. "This is because you're qualified." The memorial just made the right people notice. I looked up at him. "I accept the assignment, sir." "Good." Dismissed. I drove away from the base that evening with everything I owned packed into my car and a small moving truck following behind. The sun was setting, orange and red bleeding across the horizon. I'd watched this same sunset from a dozen different bases over the years, and it always looked slightly different depending on the landscape. Joint Base Andrews would be different too. New mission. New people. New chance to define myself outside my family's narrative. My phone rang as I merged onto the highway. Aaron's name on the screen. I answered on Bluetooth. "Ella." "Aaron." Silence for a moment. Then, "I've been going to sessions here. On the ship. They've got counselors embedded with the deployment now." "Good. I get it now. What you were doing. Why you kept going even when Mom and Dad made it weird." I didn't say anything. "I'm sorry I told you to lay low. That was wrong. You weren't the problem. They were." I corrected. "They're the problem." Present tense. "Yeah. Are." He paused. "They want to talk to you. Apologize properly. Mom's been driving everyone crazy with it. I'm not ready for that conversation yet." "I know. I told them that. But they're going to keep trying. Let them try. I'll respond when I'm ready." I checked my mirrors, changed lanes. "How much longer on your deployment?" "For months. Then I'm stateside for a while. We should get coffee when you're back." "I'd like that." His voice softened. "I really am sorry, Ella." "I know. We'll talk more later. I'm driving right now." "Safe travels, sis." He hung up. I drove through the darkening evening, following GPS directions toward a city I'd visited but never lived in, toward a base that would become familiar over time, toward a version of my life that didn't require my family's approval to be valid. Joint Base Andrews appeared in the distance, lights on runways, control towers silhouetted against the sky. I'd start in processing Monday morning. Report to my new squadron. Meet my new commanding officer. Begin the work of helping other officers understand that asking for help wasn't weakness. My phone buzzed with a text. My mother. I didn't read it. Just kept driving, both hands on the wheel, eyes forward, moving towards something instead of away from something for the first time in months. The memorial program was still in my glove compartment. I'd brought it with me, not framed, not displayed, just present. A reminder that General Shirley had seen something in that cobble footage worth honoring. That Dixon and Reyes deserved to be remembered. That courage looked different depending on who was watching and what they valued. I parked outside the temporary lodging facility at 2100 hours. Grabbed my overnight bag from the back seat. Tomorrow, I'd find permanent housing. Tonight, I'd sleep in a standard military room with standard military furniture and wake up to a new chapter that I'd write myself, without input from people who thought embarrassment mattered more than healing. The room was exactly what I expected. Clean. Functional. Temporary. I set my bag down, checked the locks, and lay down on the bed, still fully dressed. Stared at the ceiling. Thought about nothing and everything. My phone buzzed again. Another text. I turned it face down without looking. Some things you repair. Some things you outgrow. Some things you just walk away from and let them figure out their own mistakes without you. I was learning which was which. Joint Base Andrews settled into routine faster than I expected. The new squadron welcomed me efficiently, introductions at 0800 Monday morning, desk assignment by 0900, first briefing at 1000 hours. By the end of the week, I knew the building layout, the chain of command, and which coffee in the break room was least terrible. The mental health services assignment started in September. Half my time in operations coordination, half in developing support structures. My new commanding officer, Colonel Sarah Reeves, 06, late 40s, explained the scope during our first meeting. Major Carson, we're building something that doesn't exist yet. A comprehensive mental health program for returning personnel. You'll work with clinicians, but we need operational perspective. Someone who's been through deployment, through trauma, through treatment. Someone who can speak both languages. Understood, ma'am. You'll have autonomy on this. Develop protocols, recommend policies, work directly with the medical wing. General Shirley specifically requested you for this assignment. I kept my face neutral. I appreciate the opportunity, ma'am. Don't appreciate it yet. This is going to be hard work. You'll be fighting institutional resistance, budget limitations, and 50 years of culture that says seeking help is weakness. She leaned back. But if anyone can do it, it's the major who stood up in Kabul and then stood up again by walking into a clinic. The work was exactly as challenging as she'd promised. I spent mornings in operations, coordinating transport schedules, reviewing mission parameters, managing logistics chains. Afternoons belonged to mental health services, meetings with psychiatrists and psychologists, reviewing research on trauma treatment, drafting policy recommendations. I met with Captain Villanueva via video call every Thursday at 1300 hours. She'd transferred to a different base, but we'd maintained the therapeutic relationship remotely. How's the new assignment? She asked during our second virtual session. Consuming. I'm essentially building an institutional framework for something the institution has historically rejected. Sounds impossible. Probably is. But someone has to try. How's your family situation? I'd been expecting the question. Quiet. My mother texts occasionally. My father sends emails. Aaron and I talked once. I respond minimally. They want more. I'm not ready to give it. What would being ready look like? I don't know. An apology that acknowledges what they did, not just that they're sorry I'm upset about it. Recognition that they were wrong. Commitment to actually change. I paused. But I don't think they're capable of that. I think they just want things to go back to normal. And normal was? Me being the perfect Carson daughter. No complications. No therapy. No public acknowledgement of anything difficult. Can you go back to that? No. Then you have your answer. In October, I gave my first presentation to senior leadership. 20 officers, 05 and above, gathered in a conference room while I stood at a podium and explained why mental health services needed institutional support. Post-deployment trauma affects readiness, I said, clicking through slides I'd spent 2 weeks perfecting. Officers and enlisted personnel who don't receive adequate support have higher rates of mistakes, accidents, and separations. We're losing trained personnel because we're not addressing psychological injury the same way we address physical injury. A colonel in the back raised his hand. Major, aren't you concerned about creating a culture of weakness? What happens to mission readiness if everyone thinks it's acceptable to claim trauma? I'd prepared for this question. Sir, with respect, seeking treatment isn't claiming trauma. It's managing trauma so it doesn't compromise performance. I led a flight through Kabul. Lost 2 airmen. Completed the mission. Then sought treatment so I could continue serving effectively. My readiness improved because of therapy, not despite it. Another officer spoke up. You're talking about yourself, Major. Can we generalize from one case? No, sir. That's why I've compiled data from similar programs in allied militaries, research from DoD-funded studies, and preliminary results from pilot programs at 3 bases. I advanced to the data slides. Across all metrics, personnel who receive timely mental health support show better retention rates, fewer disciplinary issues, and higher performance evaluations. The presentation lasted 40 minutes. Questions lasted another 30. When it ended, Colonel Reeves approached me. Well done, Carson. You'll get pushback, but that was a strong start. Thank you, ma'am. Over the following weeks, I met with individual squadron commanders, briefed medical personnel, and began drafting actual policy language. The resistance was real, not hostile, but skeptical. Years of institutional culture didn't shift because one major gave a good PowerPoint presentation. But I kept pushing, kept meeting, kept presenting data, kept telling my story when necessary and letting the research speak when possible. In November, my mother called. I was in my apartment, off duty, and for once I answered. Ella. Mom. You answered. She sounded surprised. I did. Silence. Then, your father and I want to see you. Talk properly. We've been trying to reach you for months. I know. Thanksgiving is coming up. The family's gathering at your uncle's place again. We'd like you there. I looked out my apartment window at the November sky, gray, heavy with potential snow. I don't think that's a good idea. Ella, please. We're sorry. We made a mistake. We didn't understand what you were going through. You didn't want to understand. There's a difference. That's not fair. It's accurate. I kept my voice level. You uninvited me from the reunion because my therapy embarrassed you. You didn't ask how I was doing. You didn't ask about Kabul. You just decided I was the problem and removed me from the equation. We didn't know about the memorial. About what General Shirley said. That shouldn't have mattered. You should have supported me regardless of whether a general publicly validated my service. More silence. Then, what do you want from us, Ella? Nothing right now. Maybe eventually I'll want a real apology. Maybe I'll want to rebuild some kind of relationship. But right now I want space. I want to do my work and live my life without feeling like I'm disappointing you by taking care of myself. You're not disappointing us. I was. You said so explicitly. My therapy appointments were embarrassing you. I paused. I'm not coming to Thanksgiving, Mom. I'm not ready. When will you be ready? I don't know. But I'll tell you when I figure it out. I ended the call before she could respond. Sat on my couch and felt nothing sharp, no anger, no guilt, just a quiet certainty that I'd made the right decision. Thanksgiving came on a Thursday. I worked a half day, then went home to my apartment and made a simple dinner. No turkey. No family. No pretense that everything was fine. Just me, a meal, and the silence I'd chosen. My phone stayed on. The family group chat showed photos from the gathering, everyone smiling, wearing different shirts this year, no Carson branding. Aaron sent me a private text, "Miss you, sis. Hope you're doing okay." I replied, "I'm good. Enjoy the day." That evening, I opened my laptop and worked on the mental health policy draft. The document had grown to 47 pages, comprehensive protocols for screening, treatment, follow-up, and leadership training. I'd present it to senior leadership in January. December brought the first real snow. I ran in it anyway, early mornings when the base was quiet and the world felt clean. Work continued, operations in the morning, mental health development in the afternoon. The rhythm became comfortable. purposeful. I started mentoring 3 junior officers who'd been referred to mental health services after deployment. Met with each of them monthly, just talked, answered questions, normalized the experience of seeking help. One of them, a first lieutenant named Chin, asked me during our second meeting, "Does it get easier? Dealing with everything after deployment." "It gets different," I said. "You learn to carry it better. And eventually you realize that carrying it properly is part of the job, not separate from it." "Your family supports you now?" I hesitated. My family and I are working through some things. But the important part is that I support myself. Their opinion doesn't define whether I'm doing the right thing. She nodded slowly. "That's good to know." On December 21st, the shortest day of the year, I received an email from General Shirley's office. Brief. Professional. An invitation to speak at next year's memorial ceremony. Topic: Operational readiness and psychological integrity. I read it 3 times. Then replied, "I accept. Thank you for the opportunity." That night, I called Aaron. He answered on the second ring. "Ella. Hey. You're back stateside. Got in last week. Still adjusting to not being on a ship. Want to get coffee sometime?" "Absolutely." "When?" "I'm free this weekend." We met Saturday morning at a cafe near his base. He looked older, not in years, but in bearing. Something had shifted in him too. We ordered coffee and sat by the window. Talked about nothing important first, his deployment, my new assignment, the weather. Then he said, "I told Mom and Dad I've been seeing a counselor." "How'd that go?" "Dad didn't say anything. Mom said she was glad I was taking care of myself." He smiled slightly. "Progress, I guess." "Maybe. They still want to talk to you. Apologize properly." "I know. I'm not ready yet." I told them that too. He looked at me directly. "For what it's worth, I think you're right. About boundaries. About not accepting half apologies." "Thanks." We finished our coffee. Made plans to meet again after the holidays. Hugged briefly in the parking lot before driving away in opposite directions. Christmas I spent alone. Not sad, just alone. Bought myself a decent dinner, watched a movie, went to bed at a reasonable hour. The family group chat was active with celebrations, but I'd muted it weeks ago. My mother sent a private text, "Merry Christmas, Ella." "We love you." I replied, "Merry Christmas." The year ended quietly. I worked through December 31st, filed end-of-year reports, updated personnel records. That evening, I sat in my apartment and thought about the past 12 months. Kabul. The memorial. The transfer. The new mission. The family fracture that hadn't healed but had at least stopped bleeding. I'd survived. More than survived, I'd built something new. A life defined by my choices, not my family's expectations. A career focused on helping others instead of just executing orders. A sense of purpose that didn't require external validation. At midnight, fireworks erupted across the city. I watched from my window, thinking about Dixon and Reyes, about General Shirley saying my name, about the 47-page policy document that might actually change things. The new year arrived whether I was ready or not. I was ready. January brought the policy presentation. 47 pages condensed into a 20-minute briefing for the base's senior leadership, colonels, generals, command staff. I'd spent weeks preparing, anticipating objections, gathering supporting data. The conference room was full when I arrived at 0800. 15 officers, all senior to me, all waiting to hear why they should fundamentally change how the Air Force approached mental health. I opened with the Kabul footage. Not all of it, just 30 seconds. My voiceover calms, steady despite the chaos. Then I stopped the video. "That's what operational effectiveness looks like under stress," I said. But operational effectiveness doesn't end when the mission does. What happens after is equally important. I walked them through the data. Retention rates. Performance metrics. Cost analyses showing that early intervention saved money compared to recruiting and training replacements. Research from allied militaries demonstrating successful programs. Then I talked about the cultural shift required. We need leadership to model help-seeking behavior. We need to normalize therapy the same way we've normalized physical fitness. We need to stop treating mental health care as a career risk and start treating it as a readiness requirement. A brigadier general in the front row raised his hand. Major, you make compelling points. But implementation, how do you propose we actually execute this across multiple squadrons with varying operational tempos? I'd prepared for this. Phased rollout, sir. Pilot program in 3 squadrons. Measure results over 6 months. Adjust protocols based on feedback. Then expand gradually. I've outlined the timeline in Appendix C. Another officer. What about command pushback? Squadron leaders who don't buy into this. Leadership training is part of the proposal. We educate commanders on recognizing signs of operational stress, on referring personnel appropriately, on creating unit cultures that support mental health. I paused. And frankly, sir, commanders who refuse to support their personnel's psychological well-being are command failures. We address that the same way we address any other leadership deficiency. The room went quiet. I just called out potential resistance from people who outranked me. Colonel Reeves spoke from the back. Major Carson's approach is direct, but she's correct. This is a readiness issue. We hold leaders accountable for mission readiness in every other domain. Mental health is no different. The general nodded slowly. Agreed. Major, this is solid work. We'll review the full proposal and provide feedback within 30 days. Expect some modifications, but the core concept is sound. Thank you, sir. The meeting ended at 0900. Officers filed out, a few stopping to shake my hand or offer brief congratulations. Colonel Reeves waited until the room cleared. That was risky, Carson. Calling out potential command resistance that directly. Yes, ma'am. But accurate. Accurate doesn't always mean wise. Respectfully, ma'am, nothing about this project is wise by traditional standards. We're trying to change institutional culture. That requires directness. She smiled slightly. Fair point. You've got 30 days to refine the proposal based on their feedback. Make it bulletproof. Will do, ma'am. I spent February refining. Met with medical personnel, incorporated feedback from the senior leadership review, adjusted timelines and resource allocations. The document grew to 53 pages. I read it so many times I could recite sections from memory. The memorial ceremony was scheduled for late March. General Shirley's office sent preparation materials in early February, topic guidelines, time limits, audience composition. I was given 20 minutes to speak about operational readiness and psychological integrity. I drafted the speech in my apartment over 3 evenings. Wrote, revised, cut unnecessary words, made every sentence count. The final version was exactly 19 minutes and 45 seconds when I practiced it aloud. At therapy, still every Thursday at 1300 hours, now with a new counselor at Andrews, I talked about the upcoming speech. Are you nervous? Captain Rodriguez asked. Young, maybe early 30s, direct in a way that reminded me of Villanueva. No, I know this material. I've lived it. What about your family? Will they attend? They don't know about it. I haven't told them. Why not? I thought about the question. Because this isn't for them. It's for me. For Dixon and Reyes. For every officer who thinks asking for help means failure. But they'll find out eventually. Probably. And if they want to attend, they can. But I'm not inviting them. They lost that privilege when they uninvited me. March arrived with uncertain weather, cold mornings, warmer afternoons, the kind of temperature swings that made running complicated. I adjusted my schedule, ran at 1100 hours when the sun had warmed things up enough. Work consumed most of my time. Operations coordination required constant attention, and the mental health program moved into pilot phase. 3 squadrons began implementing modified protocols. I visited each one monthly, met with personnel, gathered feedback, documented what worked and what needed adjustment. During one visit, a staff sergeant pulled me aside after a group briefing. Ma'am, I just want to say thank you. I was thinking about separating. Couldn't handle the stress anymore. But I started therapy last month because your program made it normal. It's helping. I'm glad, Sergeant. Keep going to your appointments. I will, ma'am. Those moments made the bureaucratic battles worth it. Every policy revision, every skeptical commander, every budget justification, it mattered because real people were getting help they wouldn't have sought otherwise. The weekend before the memorial, Aaron called. "Hey, I saw online that you're speaking at Peterson next week." "The ceremony." "Yeah, General Shirley asked me to." "That's huge, Ella. Congratulations." "Thanks. Are Mom and Dad invited?" "I didn't invite them. If they want to come, they can. But I'm not asking them to." Silence. Then, "Fair enough. For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. With all of it. The boundaries. The work. The memorial. All of it. I appreciate that. I'll be there. If you want support. Just in the audience. Won't make it weird." I felt something tight in my chest loosen slightly. "I'd like that. Thanks, Aaron." The memorial ceremony was scheduled for Saturday, March 29th at 1500 hours. I flew to Peterson AFB Friday afternoon, checked into lodging, and reviewed my speech one final time that evening. Saturday morning, I ran 0700 for miles, pushed harder than normal to burn off excess energy. Showered. Put on my service dress blues. Checked every detail, brass polished, ribbons aligned, silver oak leaves positioned correctly. Major Ella Carson, looking exactly like what I was, a field-grade officer about to address a crowd about the hardest thing I'd ever done. I arrived at Hangar 7 at 1400 hours. The space looked similar to last year, rows of chairs, flags, memorial wreaths. But this time I wasn't in the audience. I was backstage, reviewing notes, waiting for my turn to speak. General Shirley found me at 14:30. "Major Carson. Ready?" "Yes, sir." "Good. You're speaking after the footage presentation. Keep it tight. Keep it honest. That's all anyone needs." "Understood, sir." At 14:55, the ceremony began. National anthem. Invocation. General Shirley's opening remarks. Then the footage, different segments this year, but the same theme. Service. Sacrifice. Cost. At 15:20, General Shirley called my name. "Major Ella Carson will now address us on operational readiness and psychological integrity." I walked to the podium. The audience was larger than last year, maybe 400 people. Officers, enlisted, civilians, families. I found Aaron in the third row, right side. He gave me a single nod. I began. 1 year ago, I sat in this hangar and watched footage of the worst night of my career. Kabul. August 2021. I lost 2 airmen, Sergeant Dixon and Airman Reyes. We completed the mission, but the cost was permanent. My voice was steady. Clear. No trembling. After Kabul, I started therapy. Not because I was weak. Because I was a pilot who needed to remain mission-capable. Because carrying operational trauma without support compromises readiness. Because asking for help is a tactical decision, not a moral failure. I walked them through it. The resistance I'd faced. The family members who saw therapy as embarrassment. The institutional barriers that made seeking help feel like career suicide. Then the data, retention rates, performance improvements, cost savings. Operational readiness includes psychological integrity. We cannot separate them. An officer who's struggling mentally is as compromised as an officer with a broken leg. We ground pilots for medical issues. We should support them equally for psychological ones. I talked about the policy changes we'd implemented at Andrews. The pilot programs showing positive results. The cultural shift beginning to take hold. This isn't about lowering standards. It's about maintaining them. It's about ensuring our personnel can serve effectively for full careers instead of burning out after one deployment. It's about honoring service by actually taking care of those who serve. I closed with Dixon and Reyes. How their deaths taught me that survival wasn't enough. I had to actually process what happened so I could continue serving honorably. How therapy gave me the tools to do that. How other officers deserve the same support. We talk about mission readiness constantly. Equipment readiness. Training readiness. Strategic readiness. But we've ignored psychological readiness for too long. That changes now. It has to. I stepped back from the podium. The audience applauded, not a standing ovation this time, just steady, respectful recognition. General Shirley shook my hand as I left the stage. Well done, Major. Thank you, sir. The ceremony continued, more speakers, more footage, closing remarks. I sat in the back row and let the words wash over me. At 1600 hours, it ended. Outside, Aaron found me immediately. Ella, that was incredible. Thanks for coming. Wouldn't miss it. He paused. Mom and Dad weren't here. I know. Did you tell them about it? No. They're going to find out. Someone will post it online. That's fine. They can watch it remotely. I looked at him. I'm done performing for them, Aaron. Done seeking their approval. This work is too important to compromise because they're uncomfortable with vulnerability. He nodded. I get it. Truly. We got coffee nearby. Talked for an hour about nothing important. Then he drove back to his base and I returned to my lodging. My phone had 32 notifications. I scrolled through them. Colleagues congratulating me. Officers from other bases asking about the policy program. One message from my mother. Someone sent me footage of your speech. You did wonderfully. I'm proud of you. I stared at that message for a long time. I'm proud of you. The words I'd wanted to hear a year ago. The validation I'd stopped needing. I didn't reply. Just turned off my phone and watched the sunset through my window, thinking about how far I'd traveled, not in miles, but in willingness to live honestly despite the cost. Some things you repair. Some things you outgrow. Some things you simply stop needing. My family's approval had become the third category. And realizing that felt less like loss and more like freedom. I returned to Joint Base Andrews on Sunday evening. The week resumed its normal rhythm. Operations coordination Monday through Wednesday morning. Mental health program development Wednesday afternoon through Friday. The pilot programs were showing measurable results. Retention rates up 7% in participating squadrons. Performance evaluations improved. Voluntary separation requests down. Colonel Reeves called me to her office Thursday morning. Major Carson. I've been reviewing the pilot program data. This is impressive work. Thank you, ma'am. Senior leadership wants to expand the program Air Force-wide. They're requesting a full implementation plan. Timeline, resource requirements, training protocols, everything needed for system-wide rollout. I felt something shift in my chest. Not surprise. Just recognition that the work was actually succeeding. When do they need the plan, ma'am? 90 days. Can you deliver? Yes, ma'am. Good. This is going to be your legacy, Carson. The program that changed how we approach mental health service-wide. Don't underestimate what you've built here. I left her office and returned to my desk. Opened a new document. Began outlining the expansion plan. The scope was massive, hundreds of squadrons, thousands of personnel, comprehensive training for every level of leadership. But it was possible. Necessary. My phone buzzed. Aaron. I answered. Hey, quick question. Are you coming to Mom's birthday thing next month? She's turning 56. They're doing a small gathering. Did she invite me? She asked me to ask you. Said she didn't want to pressure you by asking directly. I leaned back in my chair. That's still pressure, Aaron. Just indirect. I know. But I promised I'd ask. Tell her thank you for thinking of me, but I'm not ready yet. When will you be ready? I don't know. Maybe never. Maybe next year. But definitely not next month. He sighed. She really does want to make things right, Ella. Then she can start by giving me actual space instead of using you as an intermediary. Fair point. I'll tell her. We hung up. I returned to the expansion plan. Work was easier than family. Work had clear objectives and measurable outcomes. Family was just complicated feelings wrapped in expectations I'd spent 34 years trying to meet. April brought spring weather and increased responsibilities. The expansion plan consumed my afternoons. I met with budget officers, personnel coordinators, training development specialists. Mapped out 18-month implementation timelines. Identified potential obstacles and mitigation strategies. During one meeting, a lieutenant colonel asked, Major, what happens when squadron commanders refuse to implement these protocols? We can mandate training, but we can't force culture change. We can't force it, sir, but we can incentivize it. Commander evaluations should include metrics on unit mental health utilization rates and personnel retention. Make it a readiness metric like any other. That's going to be unpopular with traditional leadership. Yes, sir. But accurate. And necessary. The expansion plan grew to 78 pages. I submitted it to Colonel Reeves on June 15th, exactly 90 days after she'd assigned it. She called me to her office 3 days later. Carson, this is exceptional work. Senior leadership is impressed. They're fast-tracking approval. That's good news, ma'am. It's more than good news. This is career-defining. You're being considered for early promotion to 05. Lieutenant Colonel. The board meets in August. I absorbed that information without external reaction. I appreciate the nomination, ma'am. You've earned it. Keep doing what you're doing. That evening, I sat in my apartment and thought about early promotion. 05 at 35. Lieutenant Colonel Carson. It would have made my father proud once. Now it just felt like professional recognition of work I'd have done regardless of advancement. My mother texted me in late June. Ella, I know you need space. But please know we love you. We're sorry for how we handled everything. When you're ready to talk, we're here. I read it 3 times. Noticed what was missing, no justification, no deflection. No, but we didn't know or you should have told us. Just acknowledgement and apology. I replied, thank you. I'm not ready yet. But I appreciate you saying that. Her response came immediately. Take all the time you need. July brought intense heat and the final approval of the expansion plan. The Air Force announced the program at a press conference. Major Ella Carson was mentioned by name as the architect. News coverage was positive, stories about modernizing military mental health care, about changing institutional culture, about one officer's mission to normalize seeking help. My phone exploded with messages. Colleagues. Old academy classmates. Officers I'd served with years ago. Even some civilians, veterans organizations, mental health advocates, reporters requesting interviews. I declined the interview requests. This wasn't about publicity. It was about implementation. The promotion board met in August. Results released in September. I checked the list at 0800 on the first Tuesday of the month. My name was there. Effective promotion to 05, Lieutenant Colonel, October 1st. I called Aaron first. Hey, I made 05. Ella, that's incredible. Congratulations. Thanks. Are you going to tell Mom and Dad? Eventually. Not right now. They'll want to celebrate with you. I know, but I'm celebrating my way first. I ended the call and sat with the news. Lieutenant Colonel at 35. Not the youngest ever, but ahead of the average timeline. Recognition that the work mattered, that I'd contributed something significant. My father's text arrived that afternoon. Heard about your promotion through the chain. Congratulations, Ella. Your mother and I are very proud. I stared at that message for 10 minutes. Your mother and I are very proud. The words that had defined my entire childhood. The approval I'd chased through academy, through pilot training, through every assignment and evaluation and medal. The validation I'd finally learned to live without. I replied, thank you. Nothing more. October 1st, I pinned on silver oak leaves. 05. Lieutenant Colonel. Colonel Reeves administered the promotion ceremony in her office, small gathering, just my immediate colleagues, brief and professional. No family present. I'd told them about the ceremony but hadn't invited them. Aaron sent flowers to my office. The card read, proud of you, sis. Always. My parents sent nothing. That absence felt like its own kind of message. The mental health expansion rolled out in phases through fall. I traveled to 6 bases, conducted training sessions, met with commanders, answered questions. The resistance was real but manageable. Most officers recognized the necessity even if they didn't fully embrace the culture change. During one training session, a colonel raised his hand. Lieutenant Colonel Carson, how do we balance mission requirements with mental health needs? What happens when operational tempo doesn't allow time for therapy appointments? Sir, we make time the same way we make time for physical fitness, for medical appointments, for any other readiness requirement. If an officer is mentally compromised, they're not mission capable. Prioritizing mental health is prioritizing mission effectiveness. He nodded slowly. Understood. November arrived. Thanksgiving approached. My mother called on a Tuesday evening. I answered. Ella. Hi. Mom. I wanted to invite you to Thanksgiving. Personally. Not through Aaron. Just us, you, me, your father, Aaron if he's stateside. Small. Quiet. I looked out my apartment window at the darkening sky. I don't think I'm ready for that yet. When will you be ready? I don't know, Mom. But probably not this year. Silence. Then, can I ask what you need from us? To be ready? That question, direct, honest, landed differently than the others. I thought about it carefully. I need to know you understand why what you did hurt. Not just that you're sorry, but that you actually comprehend what it meant when you uninvited me for going to therapy. I need to know that if I came back into regular contact with you, you wouldn't repeat that pattern. That you wouldn't see vulnerability as weakness. We do understand, Ella. We were wrong. Completely wrong. Maybe you do. But I need time to trust that. To believe it's real and not just something you're saying because a general validated my service publicly. That's fair, she said quietly. Take your time. We'll be here. I thanked her and ended the call. Sat in the quiet of my apartment and felt something that wasn't quite forgiveness, but wasn't quite anger either. Just distance. Space. The beginning of possibility. Thanksgiving I spent with 3 other officers who didn't have family nearby. We cooked together, ate together, watched football together. It was easy. Comfortable. No history to navigate, no old wounds to avoid touching. My mother texted that evening, Happy Thanksgiving, Ella. Thinking of you with love. I replied, Happy Thanksgiving, Mom. December brought the end-of-year review cycle. The mental health program showed sustained positive results across all metrics. Retention up. Performance stable or improved. Utilization rates of mental health services increasing without negative career impacts. Colonel Reeves submitted my evaluation with a recommendation for below-the-zone promotion to O6 when eligible. Outstanding officer. Transformational leader. Career trajectory toward general officer ranks. I read that evaluation 3 times. Career trajectory toward general officer ranks. Not something I'd ever considered seriously. But apparently others saw it as possible. The year ended quietly. New Year's Eve I spent alone again, watching fireworks from my apartment window, thinking about Dixon and Reyes, about Kabul, about the long path from that night to this moment. My phone buzzed at midnight. Aaron, Happy New Year, sis. Love you. Then, unexpectedly, my father. Happy New Year, Ella. Proud of everything you've accomplished. And my mother, New Year, new start. We love you. I replied to each with simple acknowledgements. No commitments. No promises. Just recognition that they'd reached out and I'd received their messages. At 00:30, I stood by my window and looked at the city lights spread below. Thought about the officer I'd been 2 years ago, sitting outside a mental health clinic, afraid of judgment, uninvited from family gatherings, uncertain whether asking for help meant admitting failure. That officer was gone. In her place stood Lieutenant Colonel Ella Carson, 05, architect of Air Force-wide mental health reform, mentor to junior officers, living proof that vulnerability and strength weren't opposites. I'd built a career on honesty. Built a life on boundaries. Built a legacy on the radical idea that taking care of yourself made you more capable, not less. And if my family eventually understood that, we might rebuild something. If they didn't, I'd be fine anyway. Some things you repair. Some things you outgrow. Some things you simply stop needing permission for. I'd learned which was which. And that knowledge felt like the truest kind of freedom. Here's where I'll leave it. If you've ever been cut out for choosing your own health, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been uninvited or shamed for going to therapy? When you set a boundary, what changed and who showed up differently? Would you have picked up those calls after the memorial or let them sit? What's one line you won't let family cross again? Drop your story in the comments so others know they're not alone. If this resonated, tap like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. More true stories about boundaries and real respect are coming next. Share this with someone who needs the reminder. Taking care of yourself is not a disgrace, it's discipline.